I walked into my parents' pristine living room and placed a single, unremarkable paper check on the mahogany coffee table, right next to my father's glass of expensive scotch. And for the first time in 30 years, the house went completely silent. This was the same room where they had spent decades calling me the disappointment, the slow learner, and the family's greatest liability. But looking at the 8-figure number printed on that slip of paper, their faces turned a shade of gray I didn't know was possible. Was I wrong to wait until the very last second to reveal my success? Or would you have let them eat their words just as publicly as they fed you their insults? I really need you to tell me if you think I crossed a line by finally showing them exactly what the dumb one was capable of. You see, growing up in the Sterling household wasn't just about being the middle child. It was about being a defect in a high-precision machine. My father, Dr. Richard Sterling, is a world-renowned neurosurgeon who measures human worth by IQ scores and surgical precision. My mother, Elena, is a senior partner at a white-shoe law firm who views life as a series of billable hours and social climbing. To them, children weren't people. They were extensions of their own resumes. My older brother, Julian, was the prototype: perfect grades, captain of the lacrosse team, and a straight shot into Harvard Medical School. My younger sister, Elena, was the artistic prodigy, a girl who could paint like a Renaissance master by age 10 and spoke 4 languages before she hit puberty. And then there was me, Leo. The glitch. My struggle started early. While Julian was reading Tolst, I was staring at a page of text where the letters looked like a swarm of angry bees. I have severe dyslexia, but back then, my father didn't believe in learning disabilities. To him, dyslexia was just a fancy word for lazy or low intelligence. I remember a Tuesday night when I was 8 years old, sitting at the dining table under the oppressive glow of a crystal chandelier. My father sat across from me, his surgical magnifying glasses pushed up on his forehead, watching me struggle to read a simple paragraph from a history textbook. Every time I stumbled over a word, he would tap his heavy gold signet ring on the table. Tap, tap, tap. He told me that if I couldn't master the English language, I'd end up cleaning the toilets in the hospital he owned. My mother would just sigh, looking at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment, as if I were a stain on the rug that she couldn't quite scrub out. One of the most painful memories I have is from my 10th birthday. I didn't want a party. I wanted a complex Lego robotics kit. My parents bought it for me, but when I struggled to read the instruction manual, Julian snatched it away. He built the entire thing in an hour just to show off, while my dad patted him on the back and told me, "See, Leo, that's what a working brain looks like." They didn't see that I had already figured out how to improve the motor function of the robot in my head. I just couldn't decode the printed words on the page. Throughout high school, the psychological warfare intensified. My father once sat me down in his study, surrounded by medical journals and leather-bound books, and told me that he had already allocated the Sterling Education Fund to Julian's residency and Elena's art school in Florence. He told me I shouldn't feel bad, because not everyone is born to lead. He suggested I look into becoming a long-haul truck driver or a construction worker, saying that the world needs strong backs more than it needs another weak mind. I remember looking at the diploma on his wall and realizing that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for him. I spent my teenage years in the garage, which became my sanctuary. While my siblings were at prep school parties, I was taking apart lawnmower engines, old computers, and discarded radios I found in the trash. I realized that while I couldn't read a book easily, I could read machines. I could see how systems flowed, how energy moved, and how logic dictated results. I once fixed my mother's broken Mercedes when the dealership said it was a total loss, but instead of being proud, she was angry that I had grease on my hands during a dinner party. When high school graduation rolled around, the contrast was sickening. Julian got a brand new European sports car for getting into residency. I got a lecture about how they weren't going to waste a college fund on someone who would likely flunk out in the first semester. That was the day the last string of affection I had for them finally snapped. I took a job at a shipping warehouse on the edge of town, working the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was brutal, back-breaking work in a building that was freezing in the winter and a furnace in the summer. But it was there, amidst the chaos of forklifts and shipping containers, that I saw the invisible problem. The way goods moved across the country was a total mess. Every day, thousands of dollars were lost because of inefficient routing, human error in the manifest, and outdated software that couldn't handle real-time changes. For the next 7 years, I lived a life of total isolation. I moved into a studio apartment that was basically a concrete box above a noisy auto shop. My furniture consisted of 4 plastic milk crates and a plywood board that served as a desk. I didn't have a television, I didn't have a social life, and I certainly didn't have their approval. I spent 18 hours a day teaching myself to code. Because of my dyslexia, I didn't see code the way others did. I saw it as a physical structure, a giant moving puzzle in 3D space. I started writing a program that would later become the backbone of my company, a predictive AI that could anticipate port congestion, weather patterns, and truck breakdowns days before they happened. I called it Project Ghost because that's exactly what I had become to my family. I remember one winter where the heater in my apartment broke, and I didn't have the $50 to fix it. I spent 3 weeks coding with gloves on, my breath visible in the air, while my brother Julian was posting photos of his ski trip to Switzerland. My mother sent me a mass email about family updates that mentioned everyone's promotions but didn't even ask where I was living. I survived on generic brand peanut butter and the pure, unadulterated spite that lived in my chest. I began cold calling manufacturing plants, offering to optimize their logistics for free just to prove my software worked. The first 50 people hung up on me. The 51st person was a man named Marcus, a grizzled warehouse manager in Ohio who was about to lose his job because of shipping delays. I told him, "Give me 48 hours. If I don't save you money, you never have to speak to me again." Within 3 months, I saved his company $200,000. Marcus became my first investor, putting in his life savings because he believed in the dumb kid more than my own father ever had. We started hearing other outcasts, brilliant kids who had been kicked out of university, or veterans who knew everything about hardware but nothing about corporate politics. We worked out of a basement with no windows, fueled by cheap coffee and the collective desire to prove the world wrong. We went through 2 years of the Hunger Games phase of the business. There were weeks where I couldn't pay my employees, so I sold my own blood and plasma just to keep the servers running. I never called my parents. I never asked for a loan. I knew that if I did, they would use it as proof that I was a failure. One night, Julian called me, not to check in, but to laugh because he heard I was working in a basement. He told me he was buying a 3rd house and asked if I wanted to come over and mow the lawn for $50. I didn't get angry. I just said, "Keep the money, Julian. You're going to need it." By the time I was 28, my company, Cypherlog, was managing the supply chains for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I was a millionaire on paper, but I kept my head down. The turning point came when a Silicon Valley titan reached out for a merger. They didn't just want the software, they wanted the mind behind it. The negotiation lasted for 6 grueling months. They tried to lowball me, thinking I was just some uneducated kid who got lucky. Little did they know, I had spent my entire life being underestimated, and that was my greatest superpower. I played them like a fiddle, using their own arrogance against them. In the end, they caved. They signed a deal that included a massive cash buyout and a significant stake in the new entity. The morning the wire transfer hit my account, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt like finishing the story. I decided it was time for a family dinner. I showed up at their house unannounced on a Friday night. They were having one of their achievement dinners for Julian, who had just been promoted to head of surgery. When I walked in, looking tired and wearing a plain black hoodie, my father's first words weren't, "How are you?" or "I missed you." He looked at me and asked if I was there to fix the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom. Julian laughed, and my mother didn't even look up from her wine glass. I sat down at the table, waited for the main course to be served, and then I did it. I pulled the check out of my pocket. It wasn't about the money, it was about the proof of my existence. Before I tell you the look on my father's face when he realized his neurosurgeon salary was basically a rounding error compared to my bank account, I need you to weigh in on this. Am I the villain for coming back just to flex on them? Or is it justice for 20 years of being told I was worthless? I really want to know what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed away forever, or would you have walked in there and dropped the hammer like I did? Drop a comment right now. I'm reading all of them and I want to hear your perspective. This is the moment where everything changed. When I slid that check across the table, the atmosphere changed instantly. My father's hand shook so hard he spilled his expensive scotch on the white lace tablecloth. He read the numbers once, twice, 3 times. 47 million, he whispered, his voice cracking like a dry leaf. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the walls were closing in. My mother's eyes darted from the check to my face, then back to the check. It was the first time she had actually looked at me in a decade without looking for a flaw or a reason to be ashamed. Then, the transformation began, and it was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Within seconds, the mocking tone was completely gone, replaced by a fake, oily warmth. My mother, who hadn't hugged me or said she loved me in years, stood up and tried to put her arm around my shoulders. She started talking about how she always knew I had a secret talent, and how she told her friends at the club that I was pursuing a stealth startup. Julian, the golden boy who was now facing a massive malpractice lawsuit he thought I didn't know about, started asking me about strategic partnerships and helping out his little brother's legacy. Elena suddenly remembered she needed a massive loan for her failing gallery and suggested we all take a family trip to the French Riviera to reconnect and heal. They were vultures circling a fresh kill, acting as if the last 20 years of insults had never happened. They started talking about what we were going to do with the money. My dad mentioned buying a private jet for his medical conferences. My mom mentioned a charity gala where she could show me off as the guest of honor. They were already spending my blood, sweat, and tears before I could even take a sip of water. I didn't let them finish their pitch. I stood up, took the check back from my father's trembling fingers, and told them that I hadn't come here to share a single cent. I told them I came here to let them know that the dumb one was officially retiring the Sterling family name from my life. I told my father that his house, his scotch, and his prestige were built on a foundation of ego, while my fortune was built on the grit and resilience he tried to beat out of me every single day of my childhood. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You spent my whole life trying to cut my brain open to see what was wrong with it. You should have been looking at my heart." The confrontation got ugly after that. My father tried to reclaim his dominance, shouting that I owed him for the roof over my head and the expensive private school I hated. I told him I'd send him a check for the rent, adjusted for inflation, if it would make him shut up and leave me alone forever. Julian tried to physically block the door, shouting that I was abandoning my blood. But I just looked at him and said, "Blood didn't keep me warm when I was freezing in that warehouse, Julian. My code did." I walked out of that house while they were still arguing over who got to call me first the next morning. I haven't looked back since. I blocked their numbers, changed my legal name to something that didn't include Sterling, and moved to a city where nobody knows my past. My brother tried to send me a legal summons for abandonment of family duties, which my legal team laughed out of court. My sister tried to sell a rags to riches story to a tabloid, but I had already signed an exclusive with a major tech magazine that told the real truth, including the part where my parents treated me like trash. The world knows the truth now. I've spent the last year using that $47 million to change lives that actually matter. I've built 3 specialized schools for neurodivergent children, where dyslexic is a badge of honor and curiosity is rewarded over test scores. I've funded startups for entrepreneurs who don't have a college degree, but have a hell of a lot of heart. I even bought the warehouse where I used to work and turned it into a tech incubator for low-income kids. My parents are still in that mahogany-filled house, aging and bitter, realizing that they traded a relationship with their son for a bit of temporary pride. They thought they were the smart ones because they followed the rules, but I was the one who rewrote the rulebook. I recently heard that my father had to sell his surgical practice to cover Julian's legal fees. They reached out to me one last time, begging for a small loan. I didn't even respond. I just sent a donation to a local animal shelter in their name and blocked the new number. At the end of the day, success is the best revenge, but peace of mind is the best reward. I learned that my value isn't defined by the people who raise me, but by the work I'm willing to put in when no one is watching. If you think I was right to walk away from them after they mocked me for a lifetime, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of people finally getting the last laugh, and definitely drop a comment below letting me know if you would have shared the wealth or stayed as cold as I did. This whole mess has taught me that family isn't about biology. It's about who stands by you when you have nothing. I'm finally living my life on my own terms, and that's worth more than any $47 million check. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.